1973, sea turtles have not been harvested. Now, if you look at Rocky, you'll see that he has some accessories on his shell. So in 1999, Rocky was actually hit by a boat, and that propeller cracked his shell open. Now, sea turtles have cartilage under their shell that's kind of like a sponge. It's super porous, and when it scars, it actually traps air. So Rocky has a permanent accumulation of air under his shell in the form of microbubbles, and there is nothing that we can do to release that air, and it's actually a very common injury with sea turtles and boat strikes. Now, any sea turtle with this accumulation of air in their shell is deemed automatically non-releasable because they are a drowning hazard. So when Rocky was found, his rear end was at the surface and his head was straight down. So he couldn't come up to breathe air, and he could not dive down to the seafloor to stay safe, to take a nap, or to eat. Now, luckily enough for Rocky, the person who hit him is the person who called it in, so we were able to get to him immediately. But now, he was a drowning hazard, so we needed to add some things on his shell to help him swim. So that black thing towards his head on his shoulder, that is a float made out of life jacket material. And if you see towards his rear end, he does have a dive weight. So that float and that weight help counteract all the air under his shell, so he can swim horizontally, he can come up to the surface to breathe air, and he can dive down to the seafloor to take his little naps. Now, Rocky, we're guessing, is around 35 years old because he finally is reaching maturity. Now, what's really interesting about green sea turtles is that they hit maturity from 30 to 35, and their diet changes. So they go from a high protein-based diet, like fish and squid and crabs, and then once they hit maturity, they transition solely to those greens, a type of seagrass called turtle grass. So right now, Rocky is slowly starting to reject all of the high protein food that we give him, and he's starting to ask for his greens. So because of that, we do know that Rocky is in that 30 to 35 year range. If he was not hitting this yet, we would not know how old he is because it is pretty much impossible to age a sea turtle unless you were there for the hatch date, unless they give us cues like this, like transitioning into maturity. Now, I do have one more sea turtle that I want to introduce to you guys, and she is going to be outside through these glass doors. Now, when you table that is next to the entrance, those are confiscated sea turtle items from people who were in different countries. They purchased them, and then they tried to come back into the U.S., and they all got confiscated at the border. Now, even though sea turtles are federally protected here in the U.S., they are not protected worldwide. So you can still find sea turtle items all over the world. But we just highly recommend, if you don't want to have an issue at the border, just please try to refrain from buying those sea turtle products. Now, out here, we have Lola. Lola is taking a full snooze right now, and she is the rarest species of sea turtle on the planet. She is called a Kemp's Ridley. So if you look at her, you'll see that she's a lot smaller than both Hector and Rocky, and that is just her species. So she's around 70 pounds right now. She's going to max out at around 100. So she does have a little more growing to go, but that is essentially her size. Now, Lola encountered two factors that made us be able to be the people that have her. So when she was around 3 months old, and if you guys look over on this book, this sign right here, you'll see a little picture of a baby sea turtle. That is actually Lola. So Lola was the size of a chips and white cookie, like super tiny. When she was 3 months old, she had her liver nibbled on by predators, and if you're nibbled on by a predator, you can still be released. That's not an issue. So when she was 3 months old, we did take her in. She was in rehab for around 8 months, and then she was released with a whole bunch of other sea turtles because there's safety in numbers. However, guess who was in the same spot 24 hours later, but this time had their flipper wrapped up in fishing line? Miss Lola. So unfortunately, that fishing line was wrapped around her flipper so tightly that we did have to amputate it in order to save her. Now, what's interesting about Lola is because she did have that injury when she was super young, she has been growing up thinking that that's just totally normal. She does not think anything else of it. And right now she's 20. Her birthday is in April, and we know Lola's exact age because we know when her hatch date was. She was only 3 months old when we found her. So Lola's species, the Kemp's Ridley, they are the rarest species of sea turtle. They are critically endangered. In 1950, there was 42,000 nesting females. By 1990, there was only 200 nesting females. So their numbers dropped quite dramatically, and that's because these guys nest during the day. So all other species of sea turtles, they use the cover of darkness to stay safe from predators when they nest. However, for Kemp's Ridleys, they nest during the day, and all the females would storm the beach at the same time and overwhelm predators. Now, poachers also caught onto that, and so for this species, it was really easy to find their nest because they nest during the day, and people wanted to find their eggs to sell on the market, and so their numbers were dropping very, very dramatically. Now, the thing about sea turtles is 1 out of 1,000 eggs reach adulthood to then have their own nest. So if Lola was out in the wild right now, she would need to lay 100 eggs for 10 years straight in order to have one of those eggs finally reach adulthood to then come back to the beach to have their own babies. So 1 out of 1,000 sea turtles reach adulthood. Now, because Lola's flipper was amputated, she has a nice clean nub. So have you guys heard of the story from Winter the Dog? Dr. Kevin Carroll actually created it. Dr. Kevin Carroll owns the Hanger Clinic, and they actually make all the prosthetics for our vets and people. And so they were like, let's try sea turtles. And so they made Lola's newest version. And then they decided that it was now time for Rocky to receive a prosthetic. So this is Rocky's prosthetic. It is exactly the same. I'm just gonna stop and wait for this plane. Yeah, and they even like scan their nub, so it's literally a perfect snug fit. Like, it's so cool.
Yep.